Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Community Choice Agencies and Integrated Distributed Energy Resources, the Case for Why and When. Apologies for the abbreviations there in our title this time, but I think it would have been excruciatingly long if we had spelled everything out there. My name is Woody Hastings, and I am going to be your host here for the facilitator. That's me on the left, and our webinar team includes Nina Turner, our Energy Program Associate, who may be able to join us today, but possibly not because she's actually on the road. She's not currently logged in, but on a regular basis, this is your team. Today's a special webinar, a little bit different, co-sponsored by the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation and the Adobe Foundation. This is the first in a series of 4 webinars focusing on integrated distributed energy resources and how they relate to community choice agencies. And so we will be doing 4 of them. I'll say now you can mark a calendar for November 14th at 11 a.m. And I'll remind you at the end as well about that. That's when we're going to be doing the next in this series. We will probably have a few other webinars between now and then, but November 14th for the next one in this series. Our key presenters today are Chris Sentieri, the Climate Solutions Manager for Blue Strike Environmental. Chris has a deep experience with community choice, energy, and distributed energy resources. I will tell you now, everyone's full bio is included as a handout in the webinar today. So there on your control panel, you will see a handout, an attachment of the speaker bios for today. So we also have Rafael Reyes, the Director of Energy Programs for Peninsula Clean Energy. And so happy to have them here today. The Adobe Project team includes Michael Clausen, Julie Allingham, and Barry Vesser, and their bios, again, are in that attached speaker bio sheet. So please take a look there, and they can they will be introducing themselves a little bit more as we proceed. Let's see, little housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded, so you will all be able to receive a copy of the recording. We keep everyone in listen-only mode, and there is a question panel on your control panel that you can enter a question at any time. We will try to save the last 10 to 15 minutes to touch on a few questions. If we miss any of them, we will be happy to follow up after the fact, after the webinar, and get your questions answered. And of course, like I said, there will be a recording. So if you're having any technical difficulties hearing or whatever, hopefully the recording will come out well and you'll be able to review that. And yeah, I already mentioned the handouts, so presenter bios and the recording and the slide decks, which I didn't mention, those will be posted at Clean Power Exchange in the webinars section of our Clean Power Exchange website. So without any further ado, I will go to our first presenters, which will be Julie Allingham and Michael Clausen, who will introduce the project, introduce themselves and the project a little bit. So take it away, Julie and Michael, and I will advance your slides for you.
Great, thanks Woody, and welcome everybody. Michael and I'd like to start today's session by briefly introducing the project we hope will be beneficial to many of you this year. It's targeted specifically toward the 5 relatively new community choice energy programs in the Bay Area, but we hope the effort will be of value well beyond those groups. This year, we're working with the team at the Center for Climate Protection to help build a broader understanding of the unique advantages and opportunities community choice agencies have, specifically with regard to distributed energy resources. The goal is to potentially accelerate DER planning and development, and therefore drive increased benefits for people in these communities, as well as to help build stronger, more differentiated CCAs. This project, as Woody mentioned, is supported by the Adobe Employee Community Fund, which offers modest grants to projects that address challenges facing the communities where their employees live and work. And Adobe is headquartered in San Jose. So we want to thank the Adobe Foundation for selecting our project for a grant. Michael and I have both consulted with the Center for Climate Protection on projects over the last few years and have been actively involved in our own respective community choice programs, Peninsula Clean Energy and San Jose Clean Energy. In addition, Michael brings deep experience from the leadership of environmental nonprofits, and I'm a project manager specializing in sustainability and clean energy projects. So we're both excited to be leading this project in our local region. Next slide, please, Woody. So for this project, we're defining distributed energy resources quite broadly as technologies and programs that displace the need to use energy generated from remote sources or brown sources. In California, we're actually seeing community choice programs at all stages of development get quite creative with programs that address really the unique needs and opportunities of their communities, and also offer added value capabilities to the distribution grid and to the CCA itself. So most commonly, people think of the building of local renewable energy projects integrated with energy storage, ideally. But other types of examples can include energy efficiency, electric vehicle incentives and rates, EV bus programs, fuel switching of buildings and homes from gas to electric, demand response technologies, microgrids, data analytics, and smart control systems for integrating all the parts. Next slide. So by engaging with experts in the topics you want to learn the most about, we'll be producing a quarterly webinar series to build knowledge, share approaches for addressing common challenges, and inspire creative thinking about your local opportunities. And this is the introductory webinar in that series. We're also compiling an online library of resources on the Clean Power Exchange to help you quickly reference existing documents, related webinars for DER, real-life project details, lessons learned, best practices, and some sample work products to help accelerate your efforts. So we've been reaching out to engage and gather topics of interest from the 5 relatively new CCAs in the Bay Area listed here on the slide. We'd like to work with staff, board members, as well as community advisory committees and gather inputs and ideas. In addition, although it's not our main focus, advocates in these communities will hopefully also find much of this information to be really useful. And everyone is welcome and invited to attend these webinars and to access all the resources that we assemble out on Clean Power Exchange. So before handing off to Michael, I'd just like to say that our project this year has rather modest goals. So to offer DER resources to help local CCAs position themselves to thrive in a dynamic environment. But really the long-term vision is to see community choice energy programs become real game changers. So by stimulating local economic development, managing the local grid more effectively, and creating new models for carbon reduction that maybe can be emulated in other communities nationwide. And our premise really is that distributed energy resources will help drive that future. Michael?
Thank you, Julie. Hello, everyone. With that project background behind us, let's get into the webinar content. We'll be hearing a bit more about the context and trends from Barry Vesser, followed by Chris Sentieri, who will share his perspectives about some timely opportunities and approaches to consider. And then we'll also hear from both Chris and Rafael Reyes about some selected highlights of interest and inspiration from both the East Bay Community Energy and the Peninsula Clean Energy programs. As you listen today, we ask you to consider the perspective that there may be a wide range of creative options that can bring value to your community choice programs, your residents and businesses, and possibly your region. And that certain modest but strategic actions can be taken early, even before your community choice program has built up much of a financial reserve. For example, an important benefit of a small pilot project can be increased public visibility, engagement, and support for your community choice program. So it's not too early for even the newest programs and advisors to be thinking about this and planning for the future. Again, thanks for being here and for jotting down ideas about DER topics and experts you'd like to see this project pursue this year. You'll be able to share your insights, ideas, and suggestions in a very brief survey at the close of the webinar. With that, let's dive right in and hear from Barry Vesser. Barry?
All right. Well,
Hello, everyone.
hold on, Barry. Let's thank you, Julie and Michael. And Barry, I need to pull up your deck here, so that'll just take a moment. And I will also be advancing your slides, Barry. So yes, now take it away, Barry. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Woody. Hello, everyone. Barry Vesser. I've been working on community choice energy in one way or another since 2005. And you might be asking yourselves, why does the Center for Climate Protection care about this issue? The center has been working on community choice advocacy and policy development since a little bit before 2005. And from the beginning, we believed that local resource development was a crucial benefit that CCAs could offer their communities. Most CCAs have greenhouse gas emissions reductions, job creation, and economic development as part of their mission. Distributed energy resources make a real contribution to the first goal of GHG reduction, and I maintain that they are key to making significant progress on creating jobs and building the economy. The center looks for solutions at speed and scale to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we believe that DER, by contributing to things that both Republicans and Democrats care about, jobs, cost savings, economic development, and a more resilient grid, will drive decarbonization of the economy faster. And CCAs can play an important institutional role in optimizing and scaling these solutions for the benefit of their customers, their communities, and grid infrastructure that we all rely on. So this, next slide, Woody. This presentation is about a 5-minute version of a 30-minute presentation. So I'm going to go pretty fast, but let me just say that if anybody has questions or wants to talk to me later about this, I love talking about this stuff. In fact, you'll probably want to get off the phone with me faster than I'll want to get off the phone. So anyway, just know that happy to talk more about this. So what you have in front of you are the industry trends that I think support a more robust engagement of CCAs with distributed energy resources. I have only time, as I said, to highlight a few of these, but I am sure that we'll be discussing some of them in more detail in the future CCA plus IDER webinar series. So Ben Kellison from GridEdge, he's the director of their Green Tech Media Research, said distributed energy resources are poised for explosive growth across the United States over the next 5 years. He emphasized that US utilities need to change and are slowly changing how they plan, operate, and maintain their distribution grids to adapt. GTM looked at the DERs of distributed solar, small-scale combined heat and power, residential thermostats, electric vehicles, and storage, energy storage, which together contributed 46.4 gigawatts of impact on the US summer peak in 2017. By 2023, that figure is expected to more than double to 104 gigawatts of flexible capacity. So DER are coming. The question is, how can CCAs incentivize this growth in a way that solves problems rather than compounding them? And that's probably a good segue to talk just quickly about the notorious and ubiquitous duck curve. Peak demand has moved to the evening while peak production is largely because of solar in the middle of the day. Given this reality, deploying more solar without storage, either on a local or a utility scale, will just make the problem worse. And of course, we need more solar to continue to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the first reason. Next slide, Woody. There we go. The California Energy Commission has estimated that to reach the state's 50% renewable portfolio standard by 2030 will require at least $5 billion in transmission and grid infrastructure upgrades. And this figure may be low. Southern California Edison already expects to spend around $2 to $4 billion in their service territory for the foreseeable future to support California's RPS. If this is true, the price tag for utility scale renewable energy may grow over time and seriously impact California ratepayers. Strategic DER deployment could significantly reduce the need for expensive transmission and distribution system upgrades, and also the overall cost of electricity services to customers. Next slide. And this next slide is probably the most important one. GTM Energy says that storage system prices are predicted to decline at the rate of 8% annually through 2022. Storage costs are coming down even faster than solar did a few years ago. And this graph focuses on the cost of lithium-ion batteries over time. It's from Tony Seba at Stanford. Lithium-ion held 98.8% of the market share in 2017, leading the market for the 13th straight quarter. The significance of the highlighted 200 kWh price point on the curve in 2020 is that below this point, widespread adoption of behind-the-meter storage will be possible. That is, Sabre predicts that it will cost residential customers $1 a day to store a day's worth of electricity. That's a reality that CCAs need to take into account and start to plan for, and maybe even encourage to happen faster. CCAs could also incentivize solar plus storage for commercial customers to help them curtail demand charges. Retaining these customers is worth the investment for CCAs since they make up a disproportionate amount of the load. I'll just use an example from Sonoma County, which I'm familiar with. Commercial and industrial customers are 12.4% of total customers and represent 43% of the load. So as a retention strategy, CCAs could target these C&I customers and incentivize them to install solar plus storage, offering to be the off-taker for surplus generation, and in exchange, get demand response and other grid services. Next slide. Many of you may be aware that SB 100 is in the state legislature right now and will be voted on in the next couple of weeks. And I'd say it's got a good shot at passage. But if it doesn't pass this year, it seems highly probable that the RPS is going to increase sometime in the next 3 to 5 years and will likely go to 100%. So I think the CCA community needs to ask ourselves, if that happens, then what is the value add of CCAs offering cleaner powers than the utilities? Next slide. And this slide is probably the one that's nearest and dearest to my heart because of what we just experienced in Sonoma County in the last year. Given the increasing frequency and intensity of wildfires, storms, and floods as a result of climate change, being able to shut down parts of the distribution grid or to island critical facilities will become increasingly important as the fires that ravaged both Northern California and Southern California demonstrated last year. And I think these are services of public good and public benefit that CCA should really be thinking about either providing directly or working with the utilities to secure. Next slide. So hopefully by this point, I've convinced you that there are some pretty compelling trends that are pushing us towards more wide-scale DER adoption. What can CCAs do to respond to these trends and add more value to their customers over time? How any individual CCA approaches DER will, of course, depend on the resources and opportunities particular to their communities. But I think that there are some general suggestions we can make that apply to most of them, and I have listed them here. I'm not going to read through them. It is also clear to me that this is a role that CCAs should embrace in a dynamic and uncertain energy policy and market environment, because they are public agencies and as such should be thinking about long-term investments for their customers that will protect them from volatility, provide new services, long-term price stability, and resilience. Sometimes you have to take a little risk to manage a much bigger risk. And I think this analysis also suggests that CCA's current advantage in price of power and percentage of clean power will erode over time. But I think that other advantages over the utilities will not, and those are being able to customize local programs, being more agile in project initiation, working with other local agencies to maximize the benefit of their projects. DERs are all about responding to local conditions, and CCAs are positioned to understand and take advantage of this characteristic. So sorry to go so quickly, but that is my quick overview. And now I'd like to turn it over to Chris Sentieri from Blue Strike Environment and have him talk about his experience in East Bay Community Energy and with other CCAs.
So Chris, you will need to unmute yourself. It looks like you're still muted, so unmute yourself so you can speak to us. Thanks very much.
Can you hear me, Woody?
Great.
Hello, everyone. This is Chris Sentieri, and I'm very happy to be here today. I want to just start with a quick thank you to the Center for Climate Protection, Woody and Barry and all the gang there for hosting these webinars, and especially to Julie and Michael for inviting Blue Strike to be part of the kickoff here today. All right, so Woody, I'm not.
Oh, right.
advancing.
Yeah, sorry, I need to do the sharing thing here. Sorry, I forgot about that. So here you go. Chris, you should now have control. My bad.
All right, no problem, and still having some trouble there.
No, you got it.
You want to
I
click
see you.
me through? All right.
You got it. Sometimes there's a little lag.
There we go. All right, just to start off, I'm going to move very quickly. I'm trying to squeeze quite a bit of content in a 15-minute slot, so bear with me if I move quickly. I want to encourage anyone who wants to talk at a deeper level about any of the content to reach out to me. My contact information is on the last slide, and I'd be happy, much like Barry, to spend some time with you talking more about these things. Just briefly, Blue Strike Environmental is a new national consulting firm. We're really focused on supporting a rapid transition to a sustainable economy. And we do that in a number of ways. My name again is Chris Sentieri. I'm the Climate Solutions Manager for Blue Strike. My background is really in clean energy and environmental policy consulting. And I have, as was said earlier, quite a bit of experience working with community choice aggregation. Most recently, I'm very lucky to have been part of the local development business plan project in East Bay Community Energy. I was the senior project manager for that project, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a moment. All right, so the purpose of the webinar today is really talk about the why and the when for CCAs to really get serious about distributed energy resources. And, you know, I will start by saying, stating the obvious, I think, which is that California's CCA industry is really exploding quickly. And one of the questions on many of our minds is sort of what role will distributed energy resources play in that evolution? And I want to say that, you know, we already see and know that DERs can and are playing a key role and helping CCAs meet their renewable portfolio standard and greenhouse gas reduction goals. That's already happening. We also see an emerging role for DERs to fulfill CCAs' resource adequacy needs through, you know, flexible local capacity that they can provide. And we're starting to see CCAs venture into that world as well, and that's exciting. We think that DERs will also provide new ways for CCAs to define their value add and can really be a key differentiator between the CCA's value proposition and that of other load serving entities or the incumbent IOUs. And lastly, I'll say we really want to see DERs playing a more central role in CCA's risk management. And that is because DERs can really be effective at helping shape load and shed load and reduce costs and manage risks for CCAs. All right, so a whole lot of things are working to create new opportunities for CCAs in the DER field. And I just want to touch on a few of them. The bottom line is that CCAs can really lead the way in terms of beneficial DER deployment. And we see, as was mentioned by Barry earlier, there's a number of public policy sort of mandates that are putting pressure on CCAs to do more in terms of DER deployment. One of them is SB 350, which had a whole lot of stuff in it, including mandatory integrated resource plans and a heavy focus on energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reductions, all of which DERs can really support. We also see the Skinner mandate, AB 2514, which requires that CCAs get at least 1% of their peak load under contract with energy storage by 2020. That's coming up quick. We also see a number of market trends. For example, the cost of resource adequacy in the market is on the rise, as is natural gas commodity prices. And that's happening at a time when, as Barry mentioned, the cost of clean dispatchable DERs, especially battery storage, is declining rapidly. And so that in and of itself creates some interesting opportunities. We also see, and I'll talk a little more about this in a moment, but the demise really of California's network of fossil fuel fired peaker plants, which presents a really substantial opportunity for CCAs to solve a number of problems and to deploy DERs. But that's a fleeting opportunity. It's really something that hopefully CCAs are paying attention to now. And then lastly, the idea of dispatchability. The ability for a CCA to aggregate a network of DERs through what's known as virtual power plant technologies is really maturing. And we believe that's going to enable CCAs to do a lot more in terms of active risk management, and that's going to help lower costs and stabilize the rate streams. It'll also open up new revenue potential. For example, being able to bid some of that capacity into the demand response auction mechanism is one example of that. All right, so one of the things that we hear, I think a lot of us on this call have talked about, is that getting started on DER planning early in the process is risky. And I'm here to tell you that waiting to start that process is equally as risky, if not more so. And that's because waiting is really the same as opportunity cost. There are a number of low-hanging fruit options that are feasible strategies that are low risk and high reward, and that don't require credit rating or significant capital for CCAs to deploy effectively. And basic economics tells us that the net present value of reducing risks and lowering costs today is much greater than it will be tomorrow. So waiting is not optimal. We also see that market volatility, as well as extreme weather events and natural disasters, as Barry pointed out, are on the rise, and that CCAs can mitigate those risks with effective and strategic DER deployment. And then lastly, I want to point out that there are a number of state and federal policies that support DER deployment that are in flux. And some of the most valuable incentives that can help enable these projects may go away. And I want you to think about the investment tax credit and the production tax credit, as well as California's self-generation incentive program. All of these things are potentially temporary and may well be phasing out now. And that means that we need to move quickly to take advantage of those. And in some cases, that can bring the costs of these projects down by 30 to 50%. And when those go away, it's going to be much more difficult for CCAs to maneuver. All right, so here, what I'm going to come back to some of these things. I'm not going to read through them all right now, but I want to say that, the point is that CCAs can work with what they have and start to develop a network of local DERs. There are a lot of things that each CCA can really do, regardless of its, credit rating status or how much revenue is coming in. And the point is, work incrementally, start where you are and make some progress. For me, the big one really starts with building the internal capacity, not necessarily going out into the market and finding vendors and paying for projects, but focusing on getting your own house in order, essentially. And that one of the big ones for this is really building an integrated data platform that takes advantage of the unique access to data that CCAs really have, and hiring staff that know how to work with that data to do analytics and understand the load profile and the opportunities for DER deployment that would be cost effective. It really starts there, and that starts to build a platform for all of these other things. I also want to advocate for CCAs to really start the process of strategic planning around DER deployment early on in your process. And that can be just using whatever internal resources you have to start to lay the scaffolding down for creating a more robust plan at some point later. But it also could be, much as the East Bay Community Energy example showed us, that you can bring in some external consultants to really help shave some time off of that process and speed things up. I'm going to come back to these other programs briefly at the end here, but you'll have these in the slides for reference later. All right, so another key point I want to make here is that in order to move these things very quickly, collaboration and knowledge transfer are really crucial. And that's really looking at strategies to leverage the experience of previous CCAs and work together collaboratively to be able to move the ball a little quicker. I'm just going to point out a few of these. Obviously, East Bay Community Energy's Local Development Business Plan is sort of a treasure trove of insights and analyses that all CCAs could really learn from. And I would encourage you to go to East Bay Community Energy's website and view the dozens of work products that were produced for that project, because I think there's a lot of learning that CCAs can take advantage of there. And likewise, MCE's Energy Efficiency Business Plan is sort of sets the bar in terms of energy efficiency strategies for CCAs. And there's a whole lot of interesting and valuable insights that are presented in that plan. And I encourage you to take a look. Barry mentioned Sonoma Clean Power's electric vehicle programs already. I won't talk much about that, but we do see that as really a best practice, a comprehensive approach to transportation electrification. I also want to point out SCP really did some innovative work to partner with PG&E after the wildfires, and they have a program called the Advanced Energy Rebuild, which is really a partnership with PG&E to work quickly to recover from those fires and to help their customers really recover. And so there are a number of DER components to that. I won't go into it, but it's something that all of you should look at. Lastly, on this point, the CEC grant-funded projects are, and there are a number of them working with CCAs that will produce case studies and toolkits that all CCAs can use. And I think everyone should be watching those. There are some advanced energy community projects that are funded by the CEC in Lancaster, as well as Marin and Richmond, and also in Humboldt County with our CEA. And so please take a look at those. Those are really a great resource for you. And then I also want to point out the collaborative procurement concept is something that is really seeming to catch on. And we see a Cal CCA-led effort to form what's been referred to as the Super JPA. That is a JPA of JPAs that can leverage the combined economies of scale of several CCAs to lower costs and really help move DER strategies forward. And then lastly, the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative is a great example of how a CCA can collaborate with an IOU in ways that produce mutual benefits. And in this case, we saw EBCE partner with PG&E to replace an aging peaker plant in downtown Oakland with a bundle of DER resources. And so that's a great best practice that's emerging right now. All right, again, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I do want to point out again that that one of the keys to effective DER planning and implementation really is having an integrated data platform that leverages the many different streams of data that the CCAs have. Again, this is not meant to be something that you take on all at once, and this was sort of broken out into a 4-step process that starts with getting the data in a place where you can run some analytics on it and hiring some staff who can understand how to use that data and mine that data. And then to use that staff and resource to develop targeted programs that really make sense and reduce costs and risk for the CCA. And that really tees up some innovative and exciting customer engagement strategies, things like the digital marketplace, whereby we can connect customers through online experiences with their own data and the available programs that the CCA can offer. And then all of that leads to the big innovations, which are really about developing customized rate designs and demand response programs, as well as the aggregation of these assets through the virtual power plant strategy. And so anyway, a lot of this begins and ends with the data, and I would encourage all of you to take some steps to do what you can to start to mine that data for value. All right, I'm almost done here. Just briefly, all of that sets up this sort of what we would call an iterative, data-driven DER planning and implementation process. Get the data, integrate it, clean it, make it available to those who can use it, analyze that data to develop programs that make sense, use the data to help inform the implementation of those programs, and then lastly, use that data to do measurement and validation that supports clear public reporting and refinement of your plans. All right, just again, I think this is about the last slide. The issue about California's network of fossil fuel fired peaker plants, which are faltering, is a huge opportunity for CCAs. A lot of you have heard me speak about this recently, but I'm going to keep ringing this bell because I think it's maybe one of the biggest opportunities in the state. But basically, it's an opportunity for CCAs because they need flexible local capacity already. They have a mandate to get energy storage anyway. They're already focusing on greenhouse gas reductions as a top priority. And it turns out that the IOUs have very common goals. And so working together with the IOUs to replace those fossil fuel assets with smart, dispatchable, distributed energy resources is really the name of the game. And all of that is encapsulated in what's happening with the peaker plant issue. Okay, just a couple slides on the local development business plan. The LDBP team, which by the way was a very big team of companies and folks, felt like this statement from the RFP for the LDBP really captured what we're talking about here today. That there's a desire to start to make clean, local, distributed assets a bigger part of what CCAs focus on. And that the reality is that transition requires some thought and concerted planning. We need to make a roadmap that helps us see where we're trying to get to and provide some direction in order to be able to achieve an aggressive timeline for DER deployment in the CCA space. And then I think this may be the last slide. I said that I would come back to some of these programs on an earlier slide. This table shows you the commitment that the East Bay Community Energy Board has made for DER deployment in the first 2 years of its existence. And my hope is that that commitment gives other CCAs courage and eliminates some of the concerns and doubts that this is something that is achievable. But basically that commitment is to implement all of these pilots and programs in the first 2 years. Really is already underway. It started with the demand response pilot, which is around peak day pricing. I won't go into the details, but there is already a demand response pilot happening a couple months into EBCE's serving of customers. They're also working to build internal capacity and synergy with the existing energy efficiency providers, of which there are many in the East Bay, and so sort of getting into that ecosystem and being a good partner with the existing programs and trying to drive initial results through that collaborative approach. We also see a commitment to do a building electrification pilot. This is a natural gas fuel switching approach, which is, in my opinion, one of the biggest opportunities for CCAs in terms of job creation, greenhouse gas reductions, and really load growth that sustains CCA's business model for the long term. And very similarly, there's a commitment to do a fleet, heavy or medium duty fleet electrification pilot that works with some of the big fleet operators in the East Bay to help them electrify. This again really provides a lot of benefits to the CCA and the community, from jobs to greenhouse gases to load shaping and other things. The collaborative procurement thing is really the biggest pillar of the plan, and you see there are a number of options there. Really leveraging its relationship with the member jurisdictions and helping them through the process of developing renewable energy assets is a collaborative procurement example. Similarly, community shared solar, this is working with community groups to help them see the opportunities and to facilitate sort of larger scale projects owned by the community. As well as community net energy metering, sort of aggregating behind the meter rooftop projects into something larger. And then briefly, enhanced net energy metering is something that East Bay Community Energy is already implementing based on our recommendations in the LDBP. And I want to say one of the neat things there is we came up with a community benefit adder mechanism that helps the CCA target the kind of benefits that it really wants to see these projects produce by providing some additional financial compensation for projects that meet those goals. And then lastly, there was a community innovation fund that was really a grant program that provides an opportunity to do small direct investments in partnership with other organizations who are maybe doing exciting DER planning work. All right, so that's all I had. Again, my contact information is here. I know I went through that very quickly. Hopefully I'm on time, and I want to tee this up now to hear from Rafael Reyes on some of the things they're doing there in Peninsula Clean Energy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. And yeah, I will give you the control here, Rafael, right now, but give me a moment because I want to mention a few things. Folks, especially for those of you who joined late, I'm Woody Hastings, the Energy Program Manager with the Center for Climate Protection, your host today. And just want to remind folks, we're all on, all the attendees are on listen only. If you do have a question you want to enter, there's a questions place on your control panel, so enter them there. We did get a question in about the slide decks. Yes, the slide decks will be made available to all the attendees in a follow-up and available at our Clean Power Exchange website. As well as a recording of the webinar. The webinar is being recorded. And I do want to mention that we will include the local development business plan in those materials. And so now, without any further ado, I'd like to let Rafael go. And folks, we might not have that much time for questions, so just wanted to also let you know that you can go ahead and enter your questions. And if we don't get to them today, we can follow up with you afterward. So Rafael, in your lower left, you should see the little arrows for controlling the slides.
Great, thank you, Woody. And so this is Rafael Reyes, Program Director for Energy Programs with Peninsula Clean Energy. And thank you for the Center for Climate Protection, Julie and Michael, for inviting me to participate. And what I'm going to do here is going to talk first about our phase 1 program, and then in a little more detail, at least conceptually, on our roadmap, what we've got and how we got there. So briefly, most of you are familiar with who we are, but Peninsula Clean Energy covers San Mateo County. We serve about 300,000 total accounts. and are obviously already delivering significant benefits to the community as our other community choice energy programs in the region. So it's great to be part of that exciting, still relatively new community. I was brought on board 4 months ago, and during that time, we have put in an initial framework around programs with 4 major elements. Obviously, we want to accelerate renewables and reduce greenhouse gases. That's really a statement about speed and specific measures. Then, of course, we want to deliver benefits to the community. And there are a whole series of specific communities that we are looking to deliver benefits to. In addition, we want to support our load serving needs. So this is about, how do we align renewables generation with load? And that has, the set of implications. And then finally, of course, we need to make sure that we are aligning with our internal capacity, building that internal capacity for future work. And that obviously, is a nod to staffing, technical financial capabilities and all of that. So our first order of business has been to look at vehicle electrification, kids not included. But we are starting with some relatively charismatic consumer-oriented electric vehicle work as part of our phase 1 program. Those are listed here for you. 4 of the 5 programs are in the electric vehicles space. I'll come back to community pilots in a moment. But we're doing electric vehicle ride and drives that have been demonstrated to significantly increase the rate of adoption. We have an apartment building technical assistance program where we're doing electrical assessments. We're encouraging use of the PG&E EV Charge Network program. But also this will be a feeder into our phase 2 infrastructure program. We're using this as an opportunity to really get a strong understanding about our apartment and condominium building stock. So we're doing a characterization study, and our electrical assessments will inform the cost expectations associated with building out infrastructure in the multi-unit dwelling segment. We're doing a new vehicle promotion modeled after the Sonoma Clean Power Drive EV program with some refinements over that program. And then we are also doing a low-income EV incentive program, which is still in the development phase, but all the other programs are actually up and running at various stages. The community pilots program is essentially a grant-like program, where we're offering some $75,000 for rapid, innovative concepts that are being brought to us, and that we're in the evaluation process now on a series of proposals that we have received, and those will be public at the end of September. I'm moving fairly quickly here in the interest of time, but hopefully there will be an opportunity for questions. And then we also have, we're responding to a series of grant opportunities. We submitted a proposal to the Department of Energy around innovative pilots for curbside and multi-unit dwelling pilots. We will actually be moving forward with those pilots irrespective of whether or not we secure the DOE funding, but that will include things like low power charging solutions with administrative capabilities within multi-unit dwellings, curbside options as another option for residential serving, EV infrastructure and the like. We are participating in a grant that was secured by the East Bay Clean Energy from the Air Quality Management District on a scoping study to assess municipal critical facilities for resilience. We're providing technical assistance to disadvantaged community schools on the electric bus solicitation from the CEC. And then participating in an NREL-led project on rate structure models for DERs. And actually, one other item I should mention here is we're supporting a proposal by the Clean Coalition on the CEC's Advanced Energy Communities Phase 2 here on the peninsula as well for resilience facilities in Redwood City disadvantaged communities. So let me talk about the roadmap. So obviously, this is a critical piece for the community choice energy programs to put in place a roadmap to start to at least establish a framework around the work, because frankly, the universe of activities is enormous. Our problem is not good ideas. Our problem is focus and making sure that we can execute and execute at scale. So the first order of business is establishing a bit of a baseline. What are our key known targets and other baselining information. So just briefly here, we of course have the state targets, listed at the bottom, and then PCE specific targets at the top. Probably the most significant of which is a target for 100% renewable energy by 2025. Now that's an ambitious target that the PCE board set at the launch of Peninsula Clean Energy. There's obviously a lot of discussion happening about what exactly that means. Is that on a RPS basis? Obviously we need to move to a time coincident basis. Although time coincident renewables by 2025 is probably very difficult and maybe not achievable, but certainly we want to reach time coincident 100% renewables soon. And so we will be driving towards 100% renewables on a time coincident basis near term, even if it's not exactly 2025. So that's one of the guideposts that we have to, goalposts that we have to work towards. Another major piece of baselining data is what our emissions looks like here. This is emissions inventory developed by the Regional Integrated Climate Action Plan system, which is a county-wide collaborative effort of all the cities in the county, where we're doing, which are doing regular emissions inventories. So this is what the pie looks like. It doesn't account for air travel, and it doesn't account for fugitive emissions of natural gas, which are a big piece, and obviously embedded carbon, but it still serves as initial guidance about where our emissions is. And no surprise, transportation is a huge piece of that, with buildings being another major piece here, and then electricity and down from there. Now, with the launch of Peninsula Clean Energy, the electricity portion of the pie has declined by 50%, at least. We're now currently for 2018, 85% greenhouse gas free in our basic power product. And what that means is that electricity is a smaller and smaller portion of the pie, and so we really need to be focusing on the other pieces of the pie to drive greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Now, if we are looking, where we do look at electricity, we also need to keep in mind the time of electricity use and how that relates to carbon. This is the carbon curve associated with the duct curve from Cal ISO. And obviously, efficiency and solar that's in the middle of the day is substantially less valuable than efficiency and solar and other measures that might affect the head of the duct. So it's really critical for us to be thinking in those terms as we think about what steps we may take in terms of further improving our emissions profile where electricity is concerned. So general philosophy around the roadmap, first looking at momentum around the largest greenhouse gas sectors where there's technical readiness, looking to make sure that we're generating community benefits. We know that building electrification is going to be a big deal, but it's going to be a long, hard slog. So starting to establish a beachhead around buildings is important. And there's a certain amount of opportunism. And currently the roadmap is essentially a qualitative assessment, but looking longer term, we will be bringing in more of an analytics-based approach to the roadmap. So at a high level, this is what our current internal roadmap looks like. There's still work to bring this to the board and get additional refinement to it. And obviously there's a lot under the hood here that's not on this slide. But starting from the top, we're looking at transportation first, private vehicles, light duty fleets, heavy duty fleets following. We will be wrapping in vehicle-to-grid integration capabilities as we start to look to fleets in particular, and perhaps demand response and related features in EV infrastructure work. Working down buildings, natural gas, starting with new construction, so assistance to local governments around building codes would be the first obvious step. And then moving on to existing buildings with probably residential first and then later commercial. Then we have a series of activities around load shaping. So obviously storage first, then probably wrapping in demand response, and then other particular measures as we move along, including potentially, taking a time valuation of energy efficiency and the like. Vehicle-to-grid integration strategies are there. And then there's going to be a certain amount of opportunistic activity. It's important to note in our roadmap, we do not have a standalone major renewables track. We're looking at generation and storage as being joined at the hip. So we probably would not do solar programs or solo renewables programs of sort of geothermal or some other non-time variant generation. And we do not have an energy efficiency track. The California Public Utilities Commission directed programs are obviously active, and we want to be complementary to those programs. But as of yet, we're not planning any efficiency-specific programs. Although, again, as I noted, at some point, we probably will engage with time valuation of energy efficiency to address load shape issues. I want to flag that in thinking about program design, there's a natural inclination to look at incentives as the major activity that the community choice energy programs may execute, and that may end up being the bulk of the work. But it's important to note that there are a lot of things that we can do. We've tried to list most of those here. There are probably others that are not here. So standard settings, finance programs, loan guarantees, piloting new technologies, all of these things are important things that we need to keep on our radar as tools that we can use to advance our objectives. And then a quick note on phase 2 program. We're developing phase 2 program now. These are going to be larger scale than the phase 1 programs. The phase 1 programs were primarily designed for speed to get things out the door quickly. And here we're looking at major EV infrastructure programs, so fast charge, multi-unit dwelling workplace. There will be support for load shaping there. We will be looking to align to state approaches. So there are a variety of standards that the CEC has been encouraging, as well as the program approaches like Cal EVIP, Unified Cal EVIP programs. And then we will be doing technology pilots. So I mentioned these are low-power EV charging solutions for multi-unit dwelling and workplace, load balancing, storage, and EV infrastructure demonstrations and the like. We will likely also significantly ramp up EV marketing, and then, of course, move into implementation on the community pilots that we will be awarding in the next month and a half.
Hey, Raphael, this is Woody here. We do need to wrap it up because we're pretty much at time. Oh, yep. That was it.
And that was it.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Raphael, and everybody. Looks like today we are not going to, unfortunately, have time to go to questions. What I do want to do is just really thank you all, by the way, for joining us. Really appreciate you folks joining us, and thanks to all the presenters. And we are going to, and we can follow up on your questions individually. We'll make sure the presenters, if any are directed specifically to them, we can follow up and just get your questions answered. Unfortunately, not here live on the webinar. The next webinar in this series on integrated distributed energy resources and community choice will be Wednesday, November 24th at 11 a.m. These are just some dates and reminders of things coming up, and this probably won't stay on your screen long enough for you to read through all of it, but you will have these slides, so all of these various community choice related events and activities coming up will be available to you. So there's that, and that's my contact information to follow up in any way, shape, or form about your comments about the webinars or anything else. But with that, I just want to thank everyone for joining. We do need to end on time, so thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Take care.